Hello and welcome to this episode of RPGGamer Top 5s. And after 3 weeks of looking at the best Star Wars games each decade had to offer, now we're going to look at the top 5 worst Star Wars games of any decade. While LucasFilm has had generally good quality control over the entire brand of Star Wars, they've definitely messed up from time to time, so we should have plenty of fodder for the list. And as usual, we'll run down our top 5, but for the notable mentions this time, we're going to list games which many would put on the list, but we've not. And we'll let you know why we don't consider those particular games the worst. At number 5, Star Wars ObiWan for the Xbox in 2001. In Star Wars ObiWan, the player controls Obi-Wan Kenobi during the sequence of events prior to and leading up to Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. The game is unique in that the lightsaber combat is controlled using the right analog stick of the Xbox controller. By moving the stick in specific motions, Kenobi will swing the lightsaber in a related motion. The character has a variety of force powers at his disposal. One power provides a version of bullet time, slowing the area around the character, effectively allowing players to attack slowed enemies, or evade to cover. Kenobi will perform an 180-degree turn with the press of a button, allowing the player to instantly spin and attack enemies behind the player character. The game also supports a multiplayer mode called Jedi Battle. In this mode, 2 players can compete as any one of the Jedi characters unlocked. Characters may be unlocked by defeating them in the single-player Jedi arena. ObiWan is one of a glut of games that came out around the release of Star Wars Episode I. While we'd had everything based around the original trilogy up till then, it seems like an entirely new time period, and a movie to base things off would be a great addition. However, they just rushed out too many games, and unfortunately many of them were bad. Also, up until then, Star Wars games had been targeted at the audience who'd grown up with the movies since the 70s and 80s. But these new games targeted the tween and teen audience of the prequel trilogy, leading to dissatisfaction among older fans. And I'm afraid Obi-Wan was just the worst offender from a very bad bunch. At number 4, Force Commander for the PC in the year 2000. Force Commander is a real-time strategy game. The player commands forces as though they are the commander, rather than an infantry unit. The game utilises a bird's-eye view around a 3D map. The levels are largely plot-focused, with initial levels playing as the Imperial faction against the Rebellion. Whilst as the plot progresses and the character defects the Rebellion, players then fight against the Imperials. Levels are ground assault based, as the game lacks space combat. Outside of the main story mode campaign, scenarios can be replayed under the scenario option, and players can set up their own battles in the skirmish mode, where up to 4 sides can compete against one another, though they only have the faction choice of Imperials or Rebellion. The game interweaves its story through the events of episodes 4 through 6, sometimes intersecting with the known Star Wars events, while telling an original Star Wars story. It is shown from the point of view of a young officer in the Imperial Navy, Bren Tantor, who begins as a stormtrooper but soon enough is given his own command. The first task from the training missions is to search for an escape pod that landed on Tatooine, and then track the droids that were inside, which is a reference to the opening scenes of Star Wars Episode 4 when C-3PO and R2-D2 escape Imperial clutches via an escape pod which crashes on Tatooine. The main character is loyal to the Empire for the first half of the game, until his brother, Delis Tantor, discovers that the Empire killed their father. Delis is imprisoned by the Empire for revealing this information, although Bren is initially led to believe that Delis has been killed. Bren defects the Rebel Alliance and proceeds to fight his former commanders. As well as the Tatooine training missions, the player participates in the Battle of Hoth from the Imperial point of view, and the Battle of Endor as a rebel. The game ends with a battle to capture the Imperial Palace on Coruscant, and ultimately the liberation of Delis. While an amazing concept, and one which we revisited with more success later on, Force Commander suffered from being too early in the move to 3D games, so looked pretty bad, and had poor and annoying controls which made it unnecessarily hard to play. However, the soundtrack was a redeeming feature of the game, and Peter McConnell created remixed tracks of John Williams' original score using influences from hard rock and techno music, and mixes of the Imperial March, which remain immensely listenable to this day. At number 3, Yoda Stories for the PC in 1997. Levels in this game are procedurally generated, and Yoda Stories has no central plot or definitive goal, It is a collection of games where the player, controlling Luke Skywalker, has to complete an objective, like rescuing someone or obtaining an object. Each game starts with Luke arriving at Dagobah in an X-Wing. If the player is still a rookie, R2-D2 can be picked up and dropped anytime for hints. After being found, Yoda gives Luke an assignment and an objective that Luke will be required to complete. Each game world is normally composed of 100 screens, however the number of active screens can be set in the options menu. To progress in the game, the player must make errands, such as finding a key or an object, until they reach the final puzzle. This perhaps doesn't deserve to be on this list, as it was conceived more as a desktop toy than a full game, so it's very light on gameplay. The gameplay has more in common with Solitaire or Minesweeper than anything else on this list, and the fact that it uses the Windows iconography makes it look unfinished and cheap, more like an app you'd download from the internet for free. For what it was designed to be, it was actually kind of fun, but as a full-price Star Wars game, it's a disaster. At number 2, Masters of Terrace for the PlayStation in 1997. Masters of Terrace is a fighting game with a 3D gameplay element, playing as Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, Han Solo, Princess Leia, Chewbacca, Arden Lyn, an ancient dark Jedi, Boba Fett, a stormtrooper, Hor, who's a Tusken Raider, Thok, who's a Gamorrean guard, Princess Leia again, but this time in her bikini, Mara Jade, or Jodo Kast, the Boba Fett ripoff. You'd battle Tekken style to victory. The player is able to move their character not only forwards and backwards using the left and right, but can sidestep by using up and down on the controller. There are 3 ways to achieve a win: knocking out the opponent, forcing the opponent out of the ring, or having the most health when the time runs out. Rounds are timed, and the player must win 2 of 3 rounds to be declared the winner. With the exception of Thok and Arden Lyn, all of the characters can fight either hand to hand or with a weapon, and alternate between the two in mid-combat. In weapons mode, the controls are configured with 3 attack buttons and a kick button, while in hand-to-hand mode, a button is assigned to each limb. Characters have an array of melee moves and also a few ranged attacks. The Force does not make an appearance in the game in the traditional sense. Instead, each character builds up a meter as they fight. The player can execute special moves related to the strength of the meter, which can unleash increasingly devastating attacks. In the game's story mode, the player selects a character and then fights through a series of opponents in a tournament setting. Upon victory in the tournament mode, players receive a full motion video ending for most of the characters. On paper, Masters of Terrace sounds like a poorly conceived but fairly interesting idea. After all, who doesn't want to play as Darth Vader beating the rebels into a pulp? But the game is a mess of implementation, with unresponsive controls and uninteresting gameplay. Notable mentions: Droid Works for the PC in 1998. Droid Works is an edutainment computer game and the premier title from LucasArts subsidiary Lucas Learning. It uses the same engine as LucasArts' previous title Star Wars Jedi Knight. The creators aimed to create a game that would be both appealing and non-violent. The game's plot involves the player saving the galaxy by manufacturing droids with specific capabilities, such as the ability to see in the dark, or the ability to jump, to complete missions. The educational portions of these missions teach players about concepts such as energy, force, motion, simple machines, light, and magnetism. C-3PO, R2-D2 and the player are sent by the Rebellion to Tatooine to stop the production at an Imperial droid factory. In the tutorial, the player must complete 8 training missions and 4 secret missions, each requiring droids with specific abilities, before proceeding to the droid factory. In the Jabba Droid Workshop, players can paint and name their creations and get a full 360-degree view of other works in progress. As an edutainment game, I'm willing to give Droid Works a lot of credit, as who wouldn't want to take bits of Star Wars droids and mash them together into monstrosities, and then send them off to complete robot assault courses? But the game is near unplayable, and the range of options is far too lacking for even the construction phase to grab your interest for long. Super Star Wars for the SNES in 1992. Wait a second, wasn't this on our list of best Star Wars games of the 1990s? Yes it was, but let's come back to that. Super Star Wars generally follows the plot of Star Wars, although some allowances were made to adapt the story to suit an action game. For example, instead of simply buying C-3PO and R2-D2 from the Jawas, Luke Skywalker must fight his way to the top of a Jawa sandcrawler while leaping from a series of moving conveyor belts. Brief cutscenes between levels tell an abbreviated version of the film's plot through written text. Later stages allow the player to control smuggler and pilot Han Solo, or Chewbacca the Wookiee. The game also features several vehicle-based levels, in which the player must control an X-Wing or a land speeder. Most of the stages consist of run-and-gun and platforming gameplay, with several different upgrades available to the standard blaster weapon. Luke can also wield a lightsaber after acquiring it from Obi-Wan Kenobi. The end of the game has players reenacting Luke's Death Star trench run to destroy the Death Star, with Darth Vader confronting the player in his TIE Advanced X-1. Many people consider this game far too hard and frustrating, something I can totally empathise with. And I'll admit, it's the one of the Super Star Wars trilogy that I played least, with Super Empire Strikes Back and Super Return of the Jedi both being far superior games in every way. But this game is well implemented, has great graphics and sound, so while I'm willing to mention it here, it doesn't feature on the list for my or anyone else's lack of skill, and the frustration rising from being bad at this game. Super Bombad Racing for the PlayStation 2 in 2001. Star Wars Super Bombad Racing is a racing game with characters from Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace, Star Wars, and Return of the Jedi. The playable characters are portrayed in a humorous light in the super deformed style, featuring unusually large heads and small bodies. This game is available on the PlayStation 2 only, as the Dreamcast, Windows, and Apple Mac versions were all cancelled due to poor sales of the PS2 edition. Yep, it's a game so bad they cancelled all the conversions, which makes it pretty unique on this list. But that said, it's basically Mario Kart with Star Wars branding, and there's still fun to be had here, especially for the younger audience it was targeted at, which is why it doesn't get to feature on the main list. And at number 1 on our list of worst Star Wars games ever, Kinect Star Wars for the Xbox 360 in 2012. Kinect Star Wars features 4 sub-games. In its primary mode, known as Jedi Destiny Darkside Rising, players take control of one of multiple Jedi Padawans. Using the Kinect, the player uses their hands to wield a lightsaber in combat. Players can also lift and throw objects with the Force using specific gestures. The story takes place during the prequel trilogy timeline in the Star Wars universe, beginning shortly after Star Wars Episode 1 The Phantom Menace, and concluding with the events of Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith. The game's pod racing utilises the Kinect to simulate the dual throttle controls on pod racers. Players extend their arms fully to operate at full speed, and retract their arm to throttle back on one or both engines. Multiple courses are offered. Rancor Rampage, the game's third mode, allows players to control one of multiple species of Rancor, which are let loose in various Star Wars locales. Arm movements synchronise between the player and their Rancor, and players can execute special attacks in this destruction-based game mode. The final game mode in Kinect Star Wars is a Galactic Dance-Off. Here players control one of several famous Star Wars characters through the use of the Kinect. Gameplay is similar to the Dance Central series, in which players must dance in synchronization with the on-screen character. Cues to upcoming dance moves are shown to the player to ensure they can stay in synchronization with the characters. The song selection consists of parodies with titles and lyrics rewritten in the Star Wars theme. For example, Gwen Stefani's Hollaback Girl is rewritten as Hologram Girl, and the Village People's YMCA is rewritten as Empire Today. Dance locales are themed to the character and a particular moment for them in the Star Wars saga story. For example, Princess Leia's dance takes place in front of Jabba the Hutt, and Han Solo's dance takes place in the carbon freezing chamber on Bespin. Well, where do you even start on this one? The Kinect controls were bad enough, being barely responsive, not conductive at all to playing by yourself. But the image of Han Solo flailing around while dancing to Star Wars branded versions of hit songs is burned into our psyches and won't come out no matter how long we drink for, which is why this game is the one we consider the worst Star Wars game of all time. Well, that's it for our top 5 worst Star Wars games list. So what did you think? Did we miss some absolute clunkers? Are there games out there which would hate even more than these? Or have we been mean to a game that you actually love? Let us know in the comments below, or by getting in touch through email or the website. So, as always, many thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe if you like what we're doing, but most of all, you look after yourselves, and we'll catch you later. Bye.